Welcome to the Weaving Magic podcast. I'm your host, Alyssa Lilly,
And I'm Tara Webb.
and we have the amazing Skye here with us today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and the first question we love to ask all of our guests is, how do you weave magic into your daily life?
I love this question so much because it's so unique to your podcast. It's not something that you hear on a daily basis. So when you sent that to me, I was really excited, just so you know.
I love
but
that.
Yeah, so for me, when I think magic, I'm always about nature just because that's where I get all of my inspiration for basically everything that I do. And I don't know if you know this, but like my book series came from my trip to Ireland. So being outside and being in that culture and everything, like just being around you in that sense. So for me, my daily routine is to try and get outside because I feel like that's where my magic comes from. That's where my creativity blooms. That's where I find those things that make my day worth living, basically, which kind of sounds morbid, but in the day and time that we live in, you got to find the moments.
You really do.
Yeah. So for me, it's, taking my cup of coffee out on my deck in the morning with my dogs and sitting there and just enjoying, the birds chirping, or if it's not 13 degrees outside, the warm sun, or going on a walk during the day or a hike on the weekend with my husband. Just small things like that, I think, make it a lot easier to get through every day and bring light to what I want my life to be like rather than what the world wants my life to be like. That makes sense.
No, that makes complete sense. And even just opening your window and breathing in the fresh air can completely reset your energy. I know that's what I do when I work during the day and I'm all caught up in my thoughts, open the window, just
Absolutely. And I work completely from home. So I'm stuck in my house all day long. So just getting out into fresh air is such a beautiful experience.
It really is.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. And I think it's, we forget how important, because when you put your feet on the ground, your body's actually receiving those negative ions coming up from the ground to like reset you. And we forget / don't know about that. And not that being out in nature can entirely erase like depression or seasonal depression or any of that, but it does help. Like it does give you a good starting point to like reset and to just kind of remember kind of where you are in the world too, I think.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. It centers you.
Say that again.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it centers you.
Oh, yeah.
Your daily life and your weekly life and everything else going on kind of just fades away for at least a minute.
One of my favorite experiences was I went on a hike once here at somewhere called Turkey Run near where I live, and I did the entire hike barefoot, and it had just rained the day before, so it was all muddy. So, as an adult, we restrict ourselves from getting messy and doing things out of the norm, and we did the whole hike barefoot and got messy and played in the rain, and it was the best experience. Definitely recommend.
I love that. It reminds me because when I was younger, I definitely never wanted to wear shoes. That was like a thing when I was a little kid. And so, yeah, you never think about the fact that, you go out in nature now and you're like, ow, my feet hurt. And it's not the same as it was when we were kids and we just played. Yeah, exactly.
Or even being inside my house, because our floors are just so, they're older since we are with military, and there's dirt that's just constantly tracked in for my kids and the dogs and stuff. And so I'm constantly putting socks on my feet because I'm like, oh, this is so gritty and
It's funny that you brought that up, because I literally this morning, because I do the same thing with my house, I always put socks on because there's always crumbs and things from kids and pets. And today I was like, no, I want to ground. I want to take my socks off and I want to feel the ground. So that just really hit home for me, Tara.
So true.
And I have to actually force. So my oldest wears socks all the time. And that's probably just because, bless his heart, all the stuff that he went through being the first child. But my other two, it's like hell getting him to put socks on. Mm-hmm. It's like I don't mind you going outside in nature barefoot, but it is, 30 degrees. So can we just like not lose a toe, please? I would really appreciate that.
No frostbite.
Before we hopped on, actually, it's really funny. Alyssa and I were talking about how we were kind of like rushing because we had missed the time a bit, and Skye was like, no, I'm an early morning person. So I would actually be really interested to hear about your kind of morning routine and what that looks like, since you are a morning person and you enjoy getting up super early.
I mean, I wouldn't say I enjoy it, but I think it works better for my day.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
fair.
Well, I think, like I mentioned, my husband's still asleep downstairs. It's about 8:30 in the morning here right now. And he sleeps in. He's a teacher, so he works, early mornings every day on a normal basis. And we kind of get up together and we do morning coffee together every morning, just because I feel like that kind of keeps us going when we're both really busy and, not seeing each other very much, except for, hi, I'm home, time to go to bed type thing. So for me, that's a really important part of my morning routine, is just on the weekdays when we are getting up at the same time, we get up and we have a cup of coffee together and we talk about what's going on in our week and what's going on in our day, so that we can kind of reconnect, because we might not be able to do that later on when we're both tired from, working all day and coming home, and him dealing with children all day and me dealing with customers all day. So that's a big thing on the weekdays. Weekends, I try to get up early on Saturdays and kind of spend my Saturday morning reading and just kind of refocusing on myself and what I want to do in my author career, because I feel like my day job takes away from that a lot of the time. And you get busy during the week and you forget to do the things that you love, that you're passionate about. So Saturday mornings are really my me time, I guess you could say, where I'm just going to get up super early. I'm going to write, or I'm going to read, or I'm going to listen to that podcast that I've been wanting to listen to for, 2 weeks and haven't gotten to do yet. And I think that really helps me with refocusing myself and refocusing what my energy is. Because otherwise I go through my week in kind of a blur and very like, oh, I hate my job, like all that stuff that goes through your head on a normal process. So that's a big thing for me, and focusing on the positives and what I like about my week rather than what is, going on. But I do get up really early. I get up at 5 on the weekdays, and the weekends it's usually like 5:30 or 6. It depends on the day if I have a lot of work to do. And then it's to bed by like 11 or 12. So it's not a lot of sleep. I should probably work on that, but yeah.
Well, and it's what feels good in your body, right? Because everybody needs different amounts of sleep. So if that's working for you, more power to you.
Well, and also I think Sundays are always the day where I'm like, okay, am I tired from this week? Should I sleep in? It's kind of my makeup day where I just decide, however the week went, this is the day that I can kind of mess with and not be strict on my schedule.
I was going to say that I don't know if you've heard kind of the podcast you've had about Ayurveda and how it's set for like different parts, different body types and stuff. And you look and give me the energy of someone who's more kapha, who is more like strong build and more grounded in who you are, especially like how you look with your skin tone. And kaphas actually need less sleep. So what you're doing, what you're doing is actually in alignment with your body. It doesn't mean that, like you said, all the time you get like 6 hours of sleep or 5 hours, but for the most part, because you're always going to feel tired, your body is heavier. And so you're like in a sense of like weighed down, not, you know what I'm saying? But your body is going to always feel tired. It's like my husband, I'm saying, hey, how are you doing today? I'm tired. And that's just like a response, because that's how his body feels. Me being Vata, I'm like so light and airy that I can be exhausted and not even realize it, because I'm just like buzzing around. So your body will feel that way, but you're kind of actually already aligning with what you're supposed to be doing.
That's so interesting. No, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm kapha too. And so for me, if I let myself get more sleep than that, I end up waking up more tired. And that's, I learned from Ayurveda, because it's my body type.
Oh, I'm 100% that way. My husband makes fun of me because he's like, you slept for like 5 hours. How are you not exhausted right now? Like, I'm fine, honestly. For the most part.
My husband gets up and has to like, that's when he does his workout in the morning. I mean, it takes him like 5 hours to do his workout because he gets so distracted, but he like gets up to do it. And it's something I kind of envy, is that grounded feeling of where you can wake up and be like, okay, I'm good to go. Because I constantly feel tired, but because I'm always like a deficient of needing energy. Are you able to find time during the week to write, or do you mostly try your best to just do it all on the weekend?
I do write on a daily basis, because I feel like practice is just what keeps me going. And my personality type is that I have to be doing something constantly. Otherwise I will get these points where I don't write for like 3 months, or I don't write for 2 months, which is fine when my body needs to recharge and I need that break. And maybe I spend that time reading a lot more instead, and which is also really great. But I do feel like if I spend, even 15 minutes in the morning just journaling, or, talking to myself about what's going on in my week in my journal, that helps me. But I do try to write or edit every day, just a little bit of my manuscript in my novel or whatever I'm working on at that time.
What do you do to stay committed to that? Do you carve out like a specific set of time that you do that, or is it when you feel like it?
I do carve out a specific set of time because schedules for me are all that work. I don't know. I can't do like evening writing anymore. I did that a lot in college, and then I guess I've just changed since then. And my mind doesn't work that way anymore, and I'm worn out by the end of the day. But in the mornings, basically after my husband leaves for work, I'll sit down at my computer, or I'll go outside if it's nice enough, and I'll write on my laptop or in my journal or whatever. But I do try to do that between like 6 and 7 a.m. just because I work my day job at 8 a.m. So that gives me time. If I want to keep writing, then I'll keep writing until 8 a.m. and then I'll go to work. Or if I don't want to keep writing, I can just do something else, like read in the morning and kind of enjoy my morning. It helps that I don't have kids. I only have my dogs.
Well, I know you said that there are times between 3 months you just want to read instead of do it. Do you still have that time in the morning, like where you're doing something for your book or for yourself, or do you choose that time to read instead?
I will usually do something for my book in that time. So whether it be marketing or, maybe I'm taking a writing class at that time where I'm listening to somebody else talk about writing, and that kind of helps me get back into my groove. I signed up for David Farland's writing courses. So I have like 18 courses that I can just do at any time over the next 3 years. And so if I'm feeling a little stuck or whatever, I'll go and watch a couple videos on one of those courses. And I feel like in my mind, I'm just thinking, okay, I'm doing something that's productive and I feel good about it. And I'm able to apply it to my writing, even if I'm not writing my book right now. And that's okay.
I love that.
I like it. I've only done one or two of the courses now, and I actually really enjoy it. I mean, some of it's stuff you could learn just by Googling and, doing your research.
But it's always nice when someone lays it out.
Yeah, exactly. It's nice having somebody tell me and knowing that they've done this and they know what they're doing, and I'm not just reading some random stranger's blog.
So how would you say you got into writing then, and editing? I know since you're also an editor, but what prompted you getting into writing?
So it's interesting because I actually, growing up, I was sold that I was going to be a musician. Like, it's always been creativity for me, but I wanted to be a musician so badly because both my parents went to music school. So I grew up in a house full of music. Like, we had a recording studio growing up. I loved to sing. I loved to play piano and guitar. I just, that's what I wanted to do. So I went to a performing arts high school and was surrounded by musicians and realized that I did not want to be a musician. So I took an advanced creative writing class in high school and fell in love with the storytelling. So I had loved writing lyrics before that. So poetry and lyrics and everything the story basically is what I loved more than the music itself. So I took the creative writing class and fell in love with the storytelling. And my teacher was just like, "You're good at this. Why don't you just keep doing it? You're not having fun in your music classes. Like, maybe it's time for a change." And I think I was a junior in high school at that point. So I was like, oh my God, I have to figure out college. Like, what am I going to do? So I went to college for writing and for English. And I don't think that's necessary, but it was something at that time that I needed for myself. And for where I was at, I needed like that independence. So I went out of state. I left home. I went to college, and then I came back a year later because I was like, I don't want to live in Illinois. But yeah, so that's kind of where it grew from, was from writing lyrics and poetry and things like that. And then it just became novel writing. And I've always loved to read. So I was just like, I just want to tell stories. This sounds great. Let's just keep doing this. And I never changed my mind on that. So I guess that's just what I was meant to do.
That is why, to me, it's so important to have technical schools or schools that specifically help people figure this out. I went to a regular quote unquote high school where I felt like I didn't learn half the stuff I did learn this stuff, but it was just like not even worth it in my opinion. And then I went to college for theater and have a degree in theater and performance studies that I do not use. Love it entirely. But like, if I had gone to a performing arts high school, maybe I would have seen that. Like, maybe I would have understood, hey, I really enjoy being an actress, but not something I want to do as a career. I feel like that saves you so much time, so much heartache, and all the stuff that we go through in college.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't have to go, to community college or to go through something that I didn't know what I was going to do, which I have so many friends, and my husband's this way too. He didn't know what he wanted to do, and he was just wasting money on college the whole time because he was trying to figure it out. And I'm like, that's how people go into debt. Like, it's terrible. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I think that's a beautiful thing, especially with the technical schools of, even when you do go to college, of choosing a technical area if that's something that you think is going to be more beneficial. That's something I'm strongly for, because I think it gives you what you need and not all this excess fluff of like, we have to be a well-rounded person. Well, all that well-rounded stuff I don't use. I mean,
and is it really well-rounded? Let's
exactly.
be real.
It isn't.
It's not. No, it's just more pressure on a kid who's like 18.
To memorize and do a standardized testing.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that thought earlier about, because my oldest is 8 right now, and then kind of like going through this idea of, when a kid becomes an adult, quote unquote. When I was 18, I thought I was an adult, right? You think like, oh, I know the world. And then being 32, I'm like, I know nothing. And it's just this interesting thought of, we do put adults on kids, in my opinion now, relatively early. I feel like there should be another title, because you're sending them out there, and they do need that. Like, they do need that time to go and figure things out. But to place a title of adult on them versus something else, it feels like you're struggling to figure things out until you're 30. And even then, I feel like I don't have things figured out.
I feel like adulthood is very sink or swim. Go do it. Figure it out.
Oh, absolutely. I know, because I left, like I said, I left home at 18 and I went to school in another state because I was like, I'm going to be independent. And luckily my parents were super supportive of this, and they were, all aboard, go do what you need to do, because they both did it too. And I think the whole time they were probably just thinking, yep, she'll be back. she'll figure it out. But yeah, it's a learning experience, and you do either sink or swim, and it's a lot of pressure.
But that sink or swim at that stage in your life is actually really beautiful, because you're able to learn those mistakes early and realize that I have all this other time to, not that you shouldn't make mistakes later, but it's a good time to make those mistakes. Yeah. So you started with writing. So what sent you over to editing? I guess basically because you have the degree for it as well.
Yeah, I think that is the main reason that I decided to do editing, was that I actually worked in a writing center through college. So I did a lot of academic editing and a little bit of creative editing as well, but more the academic side. And then I'm obviously a big reader, so I'm always reading, what's new on the market, what's not new on the market, what's just not going well. I like to do both because I think it's good to know both sides of it. But yeah, I think that obviously wanting to break off from a traditional day job is part of it, because I think we all, don't want to be in that cubicle for the most part. And for me, I love watching other writers grow. I'm part of the writer community. We founded that because we wanted to watch other writers grow. We wanted to help other writers find their voice on social media and in this new self-publishing world that's arising. And so for editing, that was kind of the same motivation, was that I wanted to help other stories be out there. I love watching my clients, like watching them publish their books is the best feeling ever. And being able to buy that book and be like, yes, like this story was so good. And I watched it grow and I watched them grow. And yeah, that's my favorite part of editing. So I think that once I decided to actually do it, because I had the experience there already, it was the right thing for me.
Mm-hmm. And you have a podcast now that talks about editing as well.
Yeah, with one of the other co-authors from the writing community. We both love the self-editing process, and we were talking because I get so many self-editing questions as an editor, and I get a lot of manuscripts that really aren't ready for an editor yet. And so I was like, I feel like there's this missing thing where people don't know how to self-edit yet, and they don't know when their manuscript is ready to send to an editor. And so that's what we really wanted to focus on. So with this editing podcast, we're just doing one little tip every month, something that you can put into your editing process that's going to help you prepare to send it to an editor later on. And it's been really fun.
What's the name? Drop the podcast.
editing tipsies because we are editing with our wine.
Yes, I love it.
Yes, so it's fun. And it's just one little tip. They're 15 to 20 minutes long. It's really quick because we wanted it to be something you could listen to kind of on your way to work and input into your writing process.
As you walk from the kitchen to the bedroom. No,
yes.
I know it makes me want to go listen to second guess my own editing. Like, hold on, let me see where I am. But no, I'm
always learning, honestly. Like there's always something new to put in. And I love asking our listeners for suggestions for episodes because sometimes I'm like, oh, I didn't even think about that. Like that's a great idea. Let's talk about that.
So I feel like you've already said your biggest tip for staying committed to your writing is basically to write every day. For those who just can't seem to find a way to write every day, you know, for whatever reason with kids or as Alyssa said with her hand up, just in general, like what would you recommend?
I love that because I've had this conversation multiple times because I do write every day. And then people will say, well, do you recommend it? I'm like, no, I don't recommend it because if that's not the way that your life works, then you don't need to force yourself into doing something that's not going to work for you. And I think a lot of people do force themselves into that, and it can completely burn you out if you are not the type of person who has the time in your day to write every day or who can keep that schedule. So there are times, you know, in my life when things get crazy and I don't write every day, and you have to forgive yourself and be okay with that. So I think that's a really good thing to bring up is that, you know, it's not for everybody. It doesn't always work that way. And for me, my biggest tip for staying committed to writing is to constantly remind yourself why you started. And I like to put like sticky notes on all over my house. Basically, I'd probably drive my husband crazy, but just reminding myself, you know, this is why I started writing, or this is a book that I love, and this is what inspired me to tell stories, or pictures of things that inspire your writing, keeping like a visual board somewhere where you see it every day. So just things like that, I feel like really help with staying committed, because if you're reminding yourself of why you're passionate for something, it's going to make you want to do it more often. Another thing I really like to do is to watch movies and watch TV and watch, you know, read books, things that inspire me, who tell stories that I love. And I feel like that also inspires me to want to continue to do it.
I love that.
Well, and I have a question around, I don't know if anybody, I'm sure there's someone else out there that kind of feels the same way as I do about this. When I'm writing, especially when I'm in the midst of actually writing rough drafts or, you know, going through a book versus, oh, I have this one that I'm going to take a break from and go to kind of thing, right? It's very difficult for me to pick up other books. One, because I'm so focused on my own, but two, and maybe it's just a fear, and I would love your insight around it, of I don't want to take something I've read and apply it to my novel on accident, right? Because you see so much of what's out there, and you want to be so creative and unique in what you're writing. A lot of things, like especially in the fantasy theories, are just gonna have those tropes that are just gonna come up. But what's your tip for that? What do you think about, you know, do you read other books intentionally while writing to help you even more so, or do you try to stay away from them?
So I don't stay away from them, but I don't do an intentional read to affect my writing, if that makes sense either. What I will do is if I am absorbed in a manuscript, like you said, or I'm like right in the middle of really telling that story, I will put my reading time at a different time of day. So if I'm writing in the morning, I won't read in the morning. I'll read in the evening before I go to bed. And I feel like that helps me kind of relax too. So it's, you know, putting my brain to rest before I go to bed instead of me thinking about my story all night and staying up all night thinking like, ooh, I could write that tomorrow. Ooh, I could do this tomorrow. I am able to just, you know, escape into another world for a little while. I will say that, you know, it sounds morbid, but I don't think there's any such thing as originality anymore. I feel like, you know, there's always something that relates to something else, whether you've read it or not. Like there's always going to be a reader out there that's like, oh, that's just like this. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's good that people can make those comparisons and see the way that our stories are told differently. So like for retellings, like fairy tale retellings, there's always something new to learn in something that's already been done. And I love that aspect of writing and telling stories. So I try not to worry about it too much, I guess. And I try to just keep it separate during my day and my schedule, but I'm if you don't like to read while you write, that's totally fine too. Like, I think everybody's got their own process. And if it affects your writing and you're aware of that, I think that's a good thing too. I think you have to be aware of how your brain works and how your body reacts to those different types of storytelling. And maybe you can watch a movie instead of reading a book, and that'll be better, for that creative escape. I guess it just depends on the person.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of experimenting and figuring out what works for you, because for some people that might be awesome. It helps them get into a creative mindset, and for others it's like, no.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like I read or I write or I watch something and I'm like, ooh, I could do that better. I'm gonna go write a scene like that. And that's probably terrible, but I think it's good for your creative process to just, even if you don't ever publish whatever that thought was, but to just sit down and be like, I'm going to write that out and it's going to better my craft.
Hey, but fan fiction is a whole genre of itself for that reason.
Yeah. And people love fan fiction. I love fan fiction.
I love fan fiction.
I definitely thought you said pan fiction. And I was like, I feel like I'm missing out on something with fan fiction.
I'm sure that's a thing too.
Probably.
But no, I think that's a beautiful thought. And I guess mine came around wanting to be so original that I didn't take other thoughts. So I do like what you said. It's not morbid, it's true. And it's a nice reminder, because you can take those thoughts and shift them, because that's what the books are. I mean, basically Shakespeare wrote all the stuff anyways.
Right.
I mean, we're all just kind of, for the most part, morphing him and Grimm, the Grimm brothers, into what we want anyways. So yeah, I think that's a beautiful thought, and I actually really appreciate that. And it makes me think of, I have a book series that I'm wanting to write that's actually going to turn the fairy tale stories on top of its head. That as far as I know, no one has ever heard. And you're right, it's beautiful, because you're like, yes, I can do that better, or I can do it differently. Maybe not even better, I can do it differently.
Yeah.
And there's an appeal to that.
I would read that, so please do.
Yes.
Well, when I asked my audience on Instagram, they were saying they wanted looking through the mirror versus fairy tales. So we'll see. But I want to bring this up because I think that you are one of my heroes on being able to do this. And you're going to have to clarify the exact timeline, but you published how many books and how long? Please say.
I did 4 books in a year, which is insanity, absolute insanity. But I would say that I wrote and published them over 2 years. So it wasn't like I wrote all 4 books in that year as well. But from the publishing date of the first one to the last one, I know, yeah, it's still crazy. But I'd been thinking about that first book for a very long time, and it had been brewing in my brain for a good 3 years before I actually wrote it. So I feel like I really knew those characters and I knew that world so well already that when I sat down to actually write the book, it was, I don't want to say easy because it wasn't easy, but it just flowed and I was able to get it all on paper. And it also helped that that was a little bit before COVID started. And, I was not working at the time because we had moved. So I was in between jobs. I had a lot of free time. And it allowed me to just, sit and write for 8 hours a day. And while my husband was at work, I was treating writing like a job.
It's a dream.
I do all the time now, but back then that wasn't a thing for me. So yeah, I had a lot of extra time to do the writing and the editing. And so what it was for me, how I rapid released my 4 books was that I wrote the first 2 books. I published the first book while the second book was with my editor. And I wrote the 3rd book while the 2nd book was with my editor. So I was doing it like all at the same time, and it was very stressful. And I don't always recommend it if you don't have like a bunch of time to focus, because like I said, I had a lot of free time at that time, and I was able to, put my time into making sure I was meeting the deadlines that I'd set for myself. But my 3rd book, I pushed back the release date because I wasn't ready. It wasn't done. So I think that there's that to learn from it. I went a little ahead of myself, and I really appreciate the fact that you say that you look up to me for that, because it was such a scary thing to do and like terrifying. And I still look back like, how in the world did I do that? I don't understand. but it was worth it for me. And it really did work out well for my marketing. So I recommend it to people that have the time to do it and have the time to write, 3 or 4 books before they hit publish, and then kind of rapid release them all back to back. Because I released the first 2 books within 2 months of each other, I believe. And then the third book came out 4 months later. And then the last book was, I think, another 3 months after that. But it was quick. It was tough. I was with my editor all the time, like back and forth emails the whole time. She thinks I'm insane too. In a good way. She's the best, but it's definitely a difficult process to go through, and it's different than the traditional publishing route. Whereas if you're self-publishing, it can really help to get that many books out at one time, because Amazon loves it. Amazon loves to see that you have a new book out every couple months. I don't know why. I don't understand. Yeah, let's take notes.
Okay.
Yeah, they love to see that because it puts you on the bestseller list multiple times, and then they'll continue to put you up there because they see that you have a book coming out. And it's just something to do with the Amazon algorithm. I was working with another author when I first put my books out, and he was like, yeah, this is how it worked for me. You can try it if you got your books done. So I just kind of followed suit with what he did. And it worked because I am still in the top 50 for most of my books on the categories that I picked, which is like mythology and young adult mythology type categories on Amazon. So I'm still seen, which is great. And I think that's because I released them all back to back, because otherwise, you hear horror stories about people that put their book out and then suddenly, it's not seen for 3 months. And I'm like, okay, so I did something right. And the only thing that I can think of that I did differently was that I rapid released.
I wonder if it's in the world, and I'm new to the world of writing, but I wonder if is it worth sitting and waiting until you're done with your series before starting the editing and publishing process?
I would say not before starting the editing process. I think doing the editing, if you can afford it, because obviously editing gets really expensive, but if you can afford it, to do the editing while you're writing is helpful, because then you can adjust your books as your editor gets back to you with those notes for the book before. Publishing, though, for sure, I think that if you have the patience, which I typically don't, if you have the patience to wait to publish your book, and you can get, 2 or 3 or maybe 4 books written before you hit publish, it's helpful because the readers like when you have another book coming out, and you don't lose your audience engagement that way. You have people that, are very excited about the next book, and you have the release date at the end of the first book. Like, by the way, next book is coming out, whatever date. And so I think that helps. I think that it keeps your audience engaged. It keeps you on your toes because you have deadlines to meet, which is also kind of, I like that. I enjoy a deadline.
Sometimes we just need that fire lit under us, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's motivational almost. I mean, it can be stressful if you give yourself too many deadlines or you put them too close together. But for me, it helps me. Like I said, I'm a schedule person. So having a deadline definitely helps, but also being able to forgive yourself when you don't meet a deadline is a good habit to have.
Yeah, and understanding that your business and who you are as an author works for you. You don't work for it. So if you need to push it, if you didn't meet that deadline, you learned the lesson that you set it up too close, and we can extend it just a little bit.
I love that. Yeah. It's your business. You have to treat it like a business, but also remember that you're only human.
Yes.
Well, and I think it's also important for those who this is their first book going out and maybe are doubting being able to put it out, maybe releasing that first one and then doing the others rapid release or something. If someone who needs something of there are a lot of us who have that doubt of like, oh, if I don't get this out there, I'm not this person, I'm not an author, I'm not, whatever it is, like that voice inside our head. And after publishing that one book, you're like, oh, I can do this. Oh, I got this. Like, you need that one book. And so I think if you can do what Skye says and like do them all, but hold it back, then do it. But also if you need like that little, I'm actually an author, like title in your brain, publish one and then do the others rapid or something, because some of us need that, like, I am doing a good job, like feeling to stuff.
I need that feeling. Yeah, I think that's very real experience for most authors, is that imposter syndrome and feeling like I'm not an author because I'm not published, which is not true. You are a
Yeah.
writer if you write. You are an author if you're writing a book or a short story or whatever you're writing. You are still an author. And I think that's so important to remind ourselves every day, because it is a thing where people get upset and, you know, doubt themselves and
I
put
feel the
themselves
resistance
down.
in myself as you're saying that.
Yes, I still do it 4 books in, and I still do it at least on a weekly basis where I'm like, am I really doing the right thing? Did I do this correctly? So I think, you know, it doesn't get easier, but I think if you surround yourself with people that can remind you too, it's also very helpful. And I've done that in the past 2 years, and that's changed my life as an author, is having just that support group.
Well, my question is, with rapid releasing, were you able to stay better on top of what the secrets were and the plot lines and that kind of stuff, or did it just get like fucking confusing?
That was going to be my question.
It is confusing. I have a very, very good editor. And I say that as an editor myself, because I think that if, even as an editor, I need an editor to look at my book. And so she caught the major plot holes that I missed because I was typing away and not paying attention to what I was writing. And so I had a really good editor. I had a really good group of ARC readers and beta readers who were quick, who got back to me. That was, you know, that was really great, because obviously I was, you know, back to back releasing. It got easier for me the second or the third and fourth book. And I think that's because I was just so used to my world, and I'd written so much in it already, and I'd gotten better at organizing myself than I had been in the second book, that I think I did better then. And I was able to kind of keep track of everything. Series Bibles are very, very helpful, which I did not make one until I was editing the second book. So that was a mistake that I learned from. And I mean, there's still things obviously that I wish I'd done differently, because that's just something that you go through as a writer and as an author. And you think, oh, well, that would have been a lot easier if I'd done it this way, so I'll do it that way next time. But for the most part, I think I was able to stay on track of it. And I think it helped that for the first 2 books, I wasn't working, because I could focus just on that. And then I kind of got my world down by the time I was working again and writing the third and the fourth book.
For our Magic Weavers that may not know, what is an ARC and beta reader?
So a beta reader is someone who reads your book usually prior to an editor. It doesn't have to be prior to an editor, but they're reading that, you know, that draft stage. And they're going to be either writers or readers. Usually that's what I've found works best, because they can spot the plot holes and the developmental issues. That's usually what I'm looking for in my beta reading process. I know that it kind of differs between authors. Some authors like to look at grammar and things like that as well. But for me, it's usually just an overall story arc. And I just want, you know, general feedback on the story. Did you like it? Was there anything that was confusing? You know, did any characters feel like they could be removed, or that you wanted to know more about them? Just general questions like that. And then the ARC reader is who gets it after the editor. So it's that final proof copy. They're going to read it, and they're going to hopefully write you a review. I say that with trepidation, because obviously not everybody does that, but you're giving your book away for free in exchange for an honest review. And that's usually the agreement that you have with your ARC readers. And then when you release your book, they go in, they write their review, and it helps you on Amazon or wherever you're publishing.
Thank you.
And I would say there are even alpha readers that I heard about that are like ones that are maybe even after the first draft, or like maybe there's, you know, like trying to even need help of like, does this even sound viable? Does this sound like a good place to even go? I recently learned about that one as well.
Yeah, I've never actually used alpha readers. I have critique partners, which I feel like are kind of the same, except that my critique partners see like draft 0, and I will send them scenes that are nowhere near polished enough for any other reader to read. So I love them, but they're the ones who get that first draft where, you know, there's missing words and there's plot holes, or there's brackets that say this happens here. So that's my, I haven't done alpha readers yet though, but critique partners are also really good for that stage.
Do you, I'm gonna actually ask it in this way, how do you start? Do you use it like what's in your brain and you just kind of go? Do you like to write everything down? Do you take sticky notes and put the scenes out? Like, what is your preferred method?
It's funny because it changes with every book. I don't know why. I feel like most people have a preferred method that they stick to because it works for them. But for me, like Wings of Fate, which was my debut novel, I outlined that completely. Like every chapter had an outline and, I knew exactly what was going to happen when. And then when I went to write it, it didn't follow the outline at all. So it was like a completely different book, which is great because I love where it went. But it's funny because then I went into book 2 and I was like, I'm not going to outline. That was a waste of time. Like, no way. So I discovery wrote all of book 2. Whereas book 1, I had my sticky note timeline on the wall and everything going on. And then book 3, I did like a mixture of the two because book 2 was really hard to write. And I found out I am not a discovery writer. I need some type of plan or I'm just not going to make it. And so by book 3, I had kind of pinpointed that I need my major plot points outlined. And then I go from there and I write pretty much whatever comes to mind. So with this new series that I'm working on, I did not outline, but I did write down just, again, those major plot points. And I've got my whiteboard downstairs where I write down like major scenes that I don't want to forget to write later on. And I have my Scrivener document all like set up where it's broken down into my deleted scenes and my deleted chapters and my character bios, which I love to do. That's my favorite part. I love character bios. Probably because
They are a lot
characters.
of fun. Yeah.
They are. It's so distracting, but I love doing it. And I love like reaching out to my friends that are artists and being like, do you want to draw me a character for my character bio? I'll pay you.
And it's so funny because I feel like when you do character profiles, half of it doesn't even end up in the book.
No,
like nobody knows.
It's all for me. Yeah. So that's kind of my winging it process, is that I have a little bit of an outline, just kind of general 5 milestone points where I talk about, what's my inciting incident that's going to start this story? What's the first big thing that's going to happen that's going to push my character to go on this journey? What's the second big thing that they're going to be like, oh God, my life's falling apart, because that's how my books go. And then the climax, I usually don't write until after I've edited the book, which I know is crazy. I don't write the ending until I've self-edited the entire book one time through. And you're giving me a face because I know it's crazy.
Well, I'm processing what okay.
So do you know what the climax is, but still write it kind of thing?
Not usually.
Okay.
It's very strange because I didn't do that with my first book. My first book, I knew how it was going to end and I, followed my gut there. But by the time I got to like the 3rd and the 4th book, I just was discovery writing toward the end and was like, I don't know where this is going. Like, we're going to find out what happens to these characters and I'm going to be just as surprised as my reader is. But what I found was that by the time I got to that end point, I was burnt out because my books are so long and I was, tired and my characters weren't doing what I wanted them to do. And I was getting frustrated. And at one point I just said, okay, you know what? I'm going to go back and edit and kind of fall in love with this story again. And it worked. I went back and I edited, all the way up to the ending. And then I wrote the ending in like 2 days. And it was a whole like 30,000, words just sitting at my computer on the weekend. Like, I know what's going to happen now. So that worked for me. And I feel like I've done it ever since. And it's just, I think what happens is I just get really tired by the time I get to the end of the book. And I know in general what I want to happen, but it just doesn't feel right because I'm so exhausted. And so by going back and rereading my book or rereading and doing just a simple self-edit, I don't usually dive into the edits, but just one read through where I make notes on the plot or I do like red pen edits helps me get back into that. Ooh, I want to write this ending. Like I want to see what happens next. And I kind of experience it the same way a reader would in that case.
I think I'm going to use that. And I know we're going to talk about this here in a second for our anthology, because I've been really struggling. It's not an ending, but struggling connecting with the Siren character. And I feel like I've almost lost touch with our story. So like going back through and reading all and then coming back and kind of retelling that story. You've inspired me. Thank you.
I hope it works. Yeah, I love it. I think it's a unique experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, and my question before we do hop into the anthology is, what would you tell someone who's looking at either end of a chapter or end of a book and they're like, not so much of how do I end it, but how do I know when it's done?
That's a hard question.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a hard question because I feel like I struggle with that myself. I I had one book that I wrote and I sent it to my editor, and she literally emailed me back and said, "Where's my fight scene? Where's the end of this book? Like, you didn't end this book." But it was because I had just, gotten to the point where I was like, is it done? Is this the end of the book? Like, where am I supposed to go with this? And so I needed her to tell me that. I needed her to say, like, you didn't finish writing this book and now I'm mad at you. And what is this? So I think that one thing to look at is when you're self-editing, just looking at the overall arc and asking yourself, okay, what is this story about? What is my book about? And it can be a very general answer of, okay, my book is about a girl. She goes on a journey and she needs to find this. And ask yourself, okay, did she find that? Did she have her full character arc? Did she do what she said she was going to do? Or did she at least try to do what she said she was going to do and get to that point? And I think if you've reached the end of that question, then your story is probably good to go for an overall story. But if you haven't answered that one question that your book is about, then maybe you need to go a little further and you need to dig a little deeper. And it's the same thing with chapters. Like every chapter or every scene, because scenes can go multiple chapters, every scene has a question that you're answering or a motivation that you're following or something that your character is trying to achieve or your plot is trying to achieve. And if you can ask yourself just, okay, what is that motivation? What is that ending that we need to find? And if you haven't answered the question yet, then you're not there yet. And it's a really hard thing to do because sometimes you don't know what the question is. And I think that's the harder part, is figuring out what the question is. But it's something you have to do in those early stages of a book, is you have to figure out, okay, what's my book about? What is it really about? Is it about a girl going on a journey, or is it about her growing up? Is it about a girl finding love or a boy finding love? Or is it about finding the independence that comes along with that? And I think that if you can answer that, that's really helpful.
This is making me think of, of my books. And I think a lot of times we shy away from those, I'll call them professional tools, in a sense of that creative writing that you have the knowledge around, because it's like, well, I don't know that, and that can hold me back. But in some ways, I'm now looking at like that actually, with where I am in book 2, of like, that actually can really help you grow and see it in a clearer picture versus, well, I don't know how to plot this out. I don't know, what my climax is and this, and this, and this. But I love the way of, like you said, looking at each chapter and like what, or scene, what is the question for that, and have you answered it? And yeah, that's very beautiful.
It's also helpful, I think, when you're trying to think about keeping a reader hooked, because obviously there are chapters that you're like, okay, this is just kind of dragging on. But if you have a question that you're trying to answer, then your reader is probably thinking about that question too. And they're thinking, oh, what's going to happen? Because they want to know the answer to the question as well. And I feel like that helps with hooking, keeping a reader hooked through each chapter, is having those moments, even if it's a very small question, like maybe she needs to get from point A to point B. Did she get there?
Yeah, I'm the kind of writer that just writes. Like I do plot chapter summaries, but then I just write it out. And then when I gave it to book 1 to Nicolette, all these questions that she had, I was like, oh, I don't know. I just so I love that it gives you a place to start.
Well, and I think that's something you can do in your editing phase too. Like, it doesn't have to be while you're writing the first draft. In fact, it probably is better not to do it while you're writing the first draft, because you don't want to get caught up on those questions. Like you said, you kind of just want to get the story out on paper. But when you go through that first, maybe you read it aloud for the self edit, you can write down the questions in the margins as you go. And I feel like that helps me. And like, because then I can see the questions. I'm like, oh, I don't know. I guess I better figure out the answer to that before I move on.
I love that. So we've already mentioned it, but let's go into it, because I'm super excited for this.
And to be able to talk about it.
I know.
Yes, because we haven't. When this episode airs, we will have shared some stuff like on our own Instagrams, but we haven't really talked about it. I think a bunch of us have mentioned anthology, like
whispers.
Yes. And so this is kind of where we go into it. And this anthology is super fun and very unique, because a lot of anthologies you see nowadays are they take short stories and none of them really match, but they all match a theme. So, one I have is Enchanted Waters, and it's all about, this mermaids or whatever it is, right? And it's all unique in their own, and the author writes their story, and it has its own climax in there and that kind of stuff. And what we're doing with anthology with here at Hollow is we do each have our own characters and stories, and it's contributing to a massive
story arc,
long story. Yeah, like
it's like a novel.
It is, and it's very crazy and fun and unique. And
how many authors do we have working on this total?
7, I think.
Yeah,
I think so too.
Mm-hmm. And it's meant to be where each author has roughly 2, or we actually do have 2 characters, 2 creatures that are in the spooky world. So, we have the boogeyman, and we have a siren and a vampire and a ghost and a witch, like all
the
of
headless horseman
that come out with Halloween time. And they're all at a bar trying to win a competition, basically. And I kind of want to tie this in one thing of what you said, Skye, earlier on, but I held back because we hadn't gotten to anthology yet. You said, when you read something, it's like, oh, it reminds me of that, right? That reminder of something. Well, in our book, this bar kind of will make people think of something else that they've read. I don't want to give away the ending of it, but it made me think of that, like, oh, that's true, because you can then associate, and it helps your mind's eye better see what's going on. So,
and yet it's completely different. It's completely different.
It is. So our Skye here is our vampire and witch, and opens the book up. And I would love to have like your thoughts and just kind of what you're thinking about it and how it's been writing it so far.
It's been so fun, honestly. So I've never done an anthology before. This is the first time I've ever been a part of one. So it's funny because you say like most anthologies aren't the other way. And I'm like, well, I've never done it. So this is a first for me. So yeah, it's been really fun. It's interesting working with so many other authors on something where the story connects like this. And so I'm co-writing another book right now. So I've kind of got that experience of working with one other author, but to work with, 7 full people, it's something you have to be committed to, and you have to be ready to have those personal conversations with each person to make sure that all your characters interact correctly. And it's just been such a great learning experience and so much fun. And I love everybody that I'm working with, you two included. It's been so cool getting to know so many other authors who maybe I hadn't been in touch with before. And the story is so unique. Like you said, yes, it reminds us of something else that we will not disclose because that would give away, but it's so unique. And when we first went into this saying, oh, let's, do a Halloween anthology, I never expected it to go in the way that it did. And so it took a life of its own. Even just compared to our first meeting, our first meeting, it was a completely different story. And then it's just grown ever since.
Because I originally saw it of it being like a typical anthology where we had our own stories, and maybe they kind of connected somewhat and you could see each other character in there. But it was like, the spooky beings come out and they come out to play essentially on Halloween. And they're living their own little life. But what morphs, and I think because each of us are such great writers with that sense of what I think is gonna be fun is you're looking at all these different tones from the author, from each author, but they flow really, really well because the stories are unique to those characters, but somehow it flows in the book. It's just a very beautiful experience seeing each feeling and how each author writes.
Well, and each character is so unique too. Like we have these characters who are very well known. We've got, the boogeyman and the vampire and the witch and the siren. These are all creatures that are well known, and a Sasquatch. I mean, you never expect to see that creature in a Halloween anthology, and yet it's such a unique perspective on each character, and each one has its own voice, and it's bringing the story to life. I just started reading through, the drafts because obviously we're a little bit farther back, but I just started reading through all the drafts and I'm like, oh my gosh, these are such good writers. Like my heart. So I loved that. And I love just the uniqueness that this story is going to bring to the Halloween spirit and All Hallows Eve. And it's going to be spooky and fun.
And it's fun because it's bringing these characters to life, not just like they're these, you know, fictional fantasy, like, oh, they'll never be in our world. Like it brings it to our world, but in an even more real place, because, you know, with Yeti and Sasquatch, they're not like these massive hairy beings. They're actual like people. I mean, my idea is of Sasquatch, if you would like look at like a character profile, would be like Jason Momoa. Like how big he is and muscular, like his long hair, like that's how I see Sasquatch versus, you know, big hairy beast. And so it's fun seeing, for example, the boogeyman isn't this slimy like nose booger that's
he's like a businessman.
Yeah,
it's actually kind of sexy. He's very sexy. Which I will say, our characters have a very sexy appeal to them. I will say that.
They do. They really do.
Yeah, and I'll kind of name drop a few others because it's just so fun, is that we do have the Headless Horseman and Alina She and
Sandman.
Sandman, thank you. Sandman's an important one too.
Yeah.
I can't think if there's any more. Oh, we have Mr. W, because I will choose to not say his name. But
we love Mr. W.
If you live in the woods, you know of beings that you do not say the name of. And then
Slenderman. Yeah.
So I mean, it's a lot of characters that you kind of just think about. So within this story, do you have, either of you have a favorite part, without giving away too much, that just kind of like makes you giggle, or that you think really helps push the story along really well?
The subtle tones of BDSM between Lena and she and the boogeyman. It gets a little hot and heavy.
Brandy, and it's so hard to picture her writing it too.
I know.
She's like this great Southern accent.
I was blushing. I'm blushing now as I'm talking about it. Like, whew.
Oh yeah, I love that. I agree. That is such a great undertone to this story.
And I wasn't expecting it. It was like left field. Like, oh, this is where we're going.
Exactly. Yeah. I also really like the Headless Horseman character. I feel like he has such a unique like jerk vibe.
Yes.
I'm like, oh, I don't like you, but I really like your character.
Pompous asshole, but in the best ways.
Yeah. But he pushes the story along in such unique ways because we need him there to, you know, kind of spark things that are going to happen later on. And I really enjoyed the way that was woven through.
Same with the werewolf. We didn't mention the werewolf. The way that the werewolf took its own turn was very the way that he was brought in. And I'll say, I think it's funny because, you know, as they're coming in, so they got these tickets, essentially. It's like the golden ticket kind of. They get like these letters kind of in their sleep that Boogeyman, the Witch, and Sandman have started this competition, this challenge per se, for All Hallows Eve, and they come in to see how many lives that they can still take without lying, like they can't lie. And the person who gets the most will get a percentage of Spirit Hollow. They'll get to basically not have to worry about lives, to not have to worry about hunting or any of that kind of stuff. And one of my favorite things is the ghost, and how like she comes through and she's actually no longer a ghost in the story, and she's like bumping into things and trying to fly, but like dashes, like falls onto the floor. Like that's hilarious to me.
Yeah, I love her. And I love her interactions with my witch, because my witch is just not about it. He does not like ghosts. He does not like undead. And he is just like, stay away from me, even though you're real now, like go away the whole time.
And one of my other favorite parts is seeing Mr. W in like his little moments of, you know, I'm here to win this challenge. Oh, I want to eat you.
Yes.
Yeah, there's lots of comedic relief throughout this very dark story.
Dark and sexy story, like
dark and sexy. Yeah.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah. I think and that's where I think it comes with all the authors own little vibes. And I mean, the characters themselves, because I think, as we know, you can't force a character to be a certain way. Like, as much as it would be nice, I mean, as I'm writing book 2, there's this one character that reminds me of, and spoiler alert for anyone who's read the A Court of, Thorns and Roses series, that I want to be very similar to Feyre and Moore.
I love that.
Yes, I love that. I love their connection so very much. And that was what I was actually wanting, was that connection between these two. And it's not there. Like, they're very, Isolde is not that person that I wanted her to be with Moore. And it's not like I couldn't force, well, this is the persona you're going to have. You're going to be this sweet, I understand the trauma you're going through. No, she's like, suck it up, buttercup. We all deal with shit, And so with these characters in the anthology, it's the same way of like, I, kind of want it to go this way, but no, you're definitely taking the reins, and I'm just gonna have to follow along.
And it's so wild because as you enter the world of writing, especially because this is a very new world for me, you think going in, like, I have complete control of these characters. I know exactly what it's going to be like. And then you sit to write, you're like, oh no, that's not what's happening. That's not who you are.
And
yeah, I love that though. It's such a good experience. It's so fun when the characters take the reins and you're like, oh, I brought you to life. Cool.
And Skye, it makes me wonder, so I think Alyssa and I have kind of the same thoughts on it. And I wonder about you, if you think that the characters that we have, that we write, are they past lives? Are they ghosts in our head? Like, because sometimes
I could totally see it.
Yeah.
Right? You can't change that story. And they are talking to you. I know Nicolette has like
full-on conversations.
Yes.
And if you haven't listened to that episode where we interviewed her, check it out because she goes into detail about it.
She does. And it's beautiful and valid. And I mean, you can totally judge it all you want, but when you're in there writing, you are having those conversations and you're like, but I don't want to write that. I don't like what's happening here. Okay, fine, I'll do it. Because if you force the character to do something else, you're going to feel it. You're going to read it in the book.
Yeah, me and the siren right now we're button heads.
Well, and you hear like stories about authors who have dreams about their characters, and that's where their books evolve from, is that they just had this dream about these characters. Exactly. Like you have this dream about this character, and that makes me think, yeah, it totally could be a past life. It could be something that, literally lives in your head that you didn't know was there. Yeah, I like that. Well, I think that would be really cool, actually.
A parallel universe too.
Yeah.
Hey, there's a story for a book. There you go. About the author trying to write something. Apparently it's actually
real
past life. There you go.
Although that's kind of scary too, because if you think about how like dark books can be, like if that's a past life
oof, or a parallel universe. Oof.
I don't know if you've read Many Punctured Wings by Nicolette.
I haven't yet.
And she doesn't think it's very dark.
I heard it's dark.
It's dark in a beautiful way. And so when I was talking with her about her characters, I was like, I think your characters are real in some way. And she's like, that makes me very sad, because like this character story, you're right. You look at certain books and you're like, I feel for you. But at least if you want to look at it in that way, it's like, at least their story is being told.
Yeah, there's enough books out there that have made me cry that I believe those characters are real in some way. There's no way you can have that type of connection with someone and it just be like, no, that's just fictional.
What's that movie where the character is starting to hear the author as he's like brushing his teeth and the author's like reading the story and they make that connection? You know what I'm talking about?
I do know what you're talking about, but I don't know what it's called.
I don't know how to explain it better. Huh?
It's an older movie.
Yeah. The opening scene, he's brushing his teeth.
The only one I can think of is stuff with Jim Carrey.
That might be it.
Yeah, I think that might be it, actually.
Yeah. I don't know what it's called. Oh, well. But that's what that makes me think of. It's just like the author meeting the character in a real world. And yeah, it'd be wild.
Yeah.
Well, I had a thought and I lost it, but thank you so much, Skye.
Thank you for having me.
Here. Yes, I've enjoyed getting to know you more and chatting. And is there anything extra that you want to add before we add in our challenge for this episode?
No, I mean, I've loved being here. So thank you again for having me on. And it's been so fun talking about the anthology for the first time. I'm really excited about it.
And definitely check out the anthology, debuting, publishing, getting out there. I don't know the words. October 1st, 2022. That is our goal. I will say at least. I think we're going to hit that goal, but that's at the moment. That's our goal is October 1st, so you can enjoy it all of the Halloween time frame. And Alyssa, do you have a challenge? Do you have a thought of a way that we can challenge our listeners today? Or Skye, if you have a challenge for
our magic weavers.
Yeah, to really tap into like their own creative writing or anything like that. Putting you on the spot. Because I think it'd be fun to maybe take those little thoughts that we have throughout the day of, oh, that'd be really fun, or like even as your brain starts, wondering, to kind of go jot those down and make a little scene out of them.
Like that.
Because I know my brain's running a lot throughout the day.
Especially now.
Yeah.
Or even just having a little journal or notepad where you write your creative ideas down so that you're grounding them into reality, but you can come back to them when you have space.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody can see me, but I've got one.
Oh, yes, I love it.
And I'll even say on top of that, if it's not, writing, but choosing every morning to say that affirmation of, I am an author, I am a writer, I am an artist, I am an actor, I am a pianist, whatever it is, and it doesn't have to be just creative stuff, right? Like in that sense, whatever it is, choosing for you, create that affirmation and looking in the mirror and being like, I am this, even if I haven't performed, even if I haven't, whatever it is, validating yourself and really loving on that creative part, because as creatives,
even if it's just a dream right now, that's going to come into fruition. You get to live into that. I love that.
That dream is there for something, for a reason, even if you're literally dreaming it, like it came to you.
Sticky note on a mirror is a great idea.
Or dry erase markers on a mirror. That's what I do.
Side note, if you leave it up long enough, they start to squiggle down.
Oh, good to know.
I did that when I was in college. One time we wrote notes back and forth between my cousin and I when I stayed with her. And we left it up long enough because it was so sweet. And like a month or two later, the letters like squiggled down and like made little messes of things. And I was like, what is happening? It was so weird and cool. That was a side note. Yes, please write it on your mirror.
And on that note, we'll talk to you guys in the next one. This concludes another episode of our Weaving Magic podcast.
We release one episode a week, so be sure to subscribe to catch the latest episode as soon as it releases. You can find us on Instagram at Weaving Magick Podcast. That's Weaving Magick, MAGICK Podcast.
We would also love it if you could leave us a review. If you do, make sure to email us your review so we can send you a thank you gift. Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to find a way to weave magic into your daily life.